Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So right now, what we're going to be doing is basically the tafsir. And with our tafsir, alhamdulillah, we've been doing a really good job for quite a while. And let's just go over really quick right there what we talked about. So قُلْ فَلِلَّهِ الْحُجَّةُ الْبَالِغَةُ. We could say we already, had done some circles right there. We talked about the qul and the inference and I guess the implication that it has in our relationship with the outside world, or at least with the Muslim community, what we're talking about in terms of what you contain as part of your identity. So we looked at that قُلْ فَلِلَّهِ الْحُجَّةُ الْبَالِغَةُ, basically connecting you with the resources, which is al-wahi, because the resources are basically going to three different directions. It's either going to be wahi, or it's going to be fun speculation, or the third thing, it's basically going to be il-hawa, basically desire, the different drives, etc. So as a Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us these resources in order to help us relate what is the motive behind that person. Where are they coming from? Why should I trust their resources? Why should I not trust their resources? And this is extremely important. When you, let's say, make this analysis, you make this scrutiny, and you go deep into the resources that basically had been, let's call them the infrastructure of that person's thinking or that community's thinking, it actually makes you a person that is beyond all and beyond those indoctrinations that others may be imposing on you, whether subliminally or whether, let's say, overtly, that without you realizing or maybe realizing. So Islam wants you to recognize when you connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-hujjatul baligha. Al-hujjah, we're talking about the absolute evidence. We're talking about the ultimate references. We're talking about the highest resource that you can find, which is al-hujjatul baligha. So when we're talking about al-hujjatul baligha, this is the ultimate reference. All right, so قُلْ هَلُمَّ شُهَدَاءَكُمُ الَّذِينَ يَشْهَدُونَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَ هَذَا فَإِنْ شَهِدُوا فَلَا تَشْهَدْ مَعَهُم. Now, at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was letting you know, certainly, there may be some debates, there may be some dialogues that could happen between you and those people that come from different backgrounds, whether they basically had come telling you that this is what studies say, or this is what liberalism is, and this is what it means to be free, and those different narratives. Just look out on those different narratives, because shaitan hides within these narratives. Shaitan hides within these narratives, and people don't realize what and who is actually motivating such narratives. So Islam comes in to tell you, be careful with the labels that are presented to you. A label could be presented to you, it's telling you that it's freedom. Another label could be presented to you, telling you that this is therapy, that this is independence, that this is the free, all these, the same exact type of narrative that Shaitan himself had given Prophet Adam. He basically said, he gave it a new name. He gave it a new name. He called it شجرة الخلد, the tree of eternity. And then ملك لا يبلى. So what does Adam need? What is he basically seeking? Well, he's seeking to basically stay alive and basically increase and have that longevity, and also seeking the different resources that they would be present all the time. So he said, وَمُلْكٍ لَا يَبْلَى. And this is extremely important to keep in mind, that it is part of our own nature. And Iblis knew that as part of our nature, that what we're seeking is longevity. We're seeking resources that would enhance our longevity. And then that's what Iblis came in basically to to manipulate us into. And that's the same thing. You're talking about teenagers, for example. Iblis will come in and tell them, well, hey, this is going to give you freedom. What about the curiosity? Maybe you need to see things differently. Maybe your parents are just too backwards, and we need to basically give you that door to get out and basically get your independence. Your parents are trying to impose their authority upon you, and all these different narratives that shaitan will come in, and in order to, of course, cause and bring in this complete deviation, whether in a child's or in a teenager's mind, or whether in an adult's mind or in a parent's mind, or the list goes on and on. And we talked about talbis iblis. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know how to look farther and basically put on the lens of Quran and Sunnah in order to X-ray, MRI, CAT scan, whatever you want to call it, and basically look beyond the narrative, look beyond basically those resources, and to know exactly what the diagnosis is, the reality of the different things, and in order to make sure that you may need to quarantine yourself away from all those contaminations in order for you to stay safe. Remember that one. We know the quarantine, that's the same thing. Yes, in Islam, it will tell you you need to quarantine yourself. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us frequently in the Quran, فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ. Certain bad friends, certain bad influences, أَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ. Iblis will use the method in order to keep you basically in contact with them. Will tell you, well, you're doing it for a da'wah reason. You're doing it for that reason. And then we'll basically give you different narratives in order for you to get access to that life. But Islam tells you, well, you need to be careful. And that's why in Surah Al-Insan, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ تَنزِيلًا فَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ وَلَا تُطِعْ مِنْهُمْ آثِمًا أَوْ كَفُورًا وَاذْكُرْ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ بُكْرَةً وَأَصِيلًا. Ayah was really clear. What was really clear? إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ تَنزِيلًا. Quran was revealed. That's your reference. فَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ. Now you recognize there's a certain commitment. There's a certain commitment to stay basically centered around, which is the principles of Allah, which are the principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَاصْبِرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ. Now, you're going to get some kind of let's call it a temptation to try to hang out with these other people, to try to hang out with their lifestyle, to try to absorb it, to try to probably think that, hey, I mean, what they're giving me is a good narrative. It sounds very independent. It sounds very strong. It sounds very free. It sounds very entertaining. It sounds very fun. All these different things, they may sound so because that's the way that shaitan manipulates and indoctrinates us in order to basically get within that parameter. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, simple and straightforward, وَلَا تُطِعْ. Don't obey who? Minhum athiman aw kafura. Whether this person is practicing sin or whether this person is a kafir, learn how to stand your grounds in the face of all of that. Whether we're speaking about athim in terms of Muslim, or whether it's a kafir in terms of a disbeliever. وَلَا تُطِعْ مِنْهُمْ آثِمًا أَوْ كَفُورًا. How can I stay steadfast? How can I stay strong? And that's why he said, وَاذْكُرِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ بُكْرَةً وَأَصِيلًا وَمِنَ اللَّيْلِ فَاسْجُدْ لَهُ وَسَبِّحْهُ لَيْلًا طَوِيلًا. What you need to do throughout the day, وَاذْكُرِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ. Whether you're talking about الذكر to mean one, which is the oral dhikr, subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, but that's one type. The different types of dhikr, whether it's seeking ilm or whether it's being committed on legislature and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's principles, or whether we're talking about audio dhikr. So audio dhikr, oral dhikr, behavioral dhikr, and certainly all of that is to keep you within al-hidayah, within commitment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically tells us, ولا تطع منهم آثما أو كفورا واذكر اسم ربك بكرة وأصيلا ومن الليل, and throughout the night, فاسجد له وسبحه ليلا طويلا. You've got a long night, and this is really important. You know, it's quite interesting. What studies actually say most heart attacks And most deaths actually happen between 3 to 4 a.m. Why so? It's quite interesting that at between 3 and 4 a.m., that's when the body temperature basically goes down. And when the temperature goes down, the blood circulation, the heart, everything, we're talking about, think of it as this engine that all of a sudden basically started not having enough electrical or enough energy to basically keep it going. And subhanAllah, that's that prime time for Qiyam al-Layl. Prime time for Qiyam al-Layl. So Islam is telling you, listen, you see that time? I want you to get up and put some physical activity, some spiritual activity, some brain activity, and go and do Qiyam al-Layl. Why? Because you're very susceptible at that time to actually get a heart attack or get, just different things. So Islam tells you, I want you at that time to use it in a way that would bring in a different kind of an energy. Spiritual energy, physical energy, brain energy. That's basically to give you that longevity, to give you health, to give you basically, to give you empowerment. It's quite interesting. Yesterday I was listening to this podcast for a neuroscientist, and this is the first thing that occurred to me. Layla Ali, go ahead, dear. You want to say something? Layla Ali, go ahead, dear. Oh dear, what happened?
No, sorry, my kids were in the background. But my question was, there's always make a correlation between like 3 a.m. having like, I don't know, I've seen this in movies, like exorcism happens around those times. But I don't know if that really correlates.
No, I would say with exorcism and what actually brings all of that, the superstition in it that spreads around and circulates around is more than what we know as a fact. The only things that I can think of that have at least a hadith that are authentic. We're talking about opening doors, opening windows, playing outside, especially during that Maghrib time. So this is one. Number two, if you get things like a snake, these kind of things, say ukhruji bismillah and don't kill it right away until you give it this warning. Certain animals like black dogs, that they're ummatun min al-jinn, that you want to look out for that. Certain things that perhaps walking alone during the night, walking alone or even walking during the night is not preferred. So just to let you know that there are a hadith that warn you from walking during the night and telling you that it's not the best thing because the jinn, that's their time or prime time of hangout. So without you seeing what's out there, Islam is telling you, listen, I want you to be at home at this time. I want you to be safe. I want you to close the windows. I want you to close the doors. I don't want your kids playing outside. I know that's the cool time, because though, it's still out there, it's still, I guess, not fully nighttime and all of that, but I want you to stay safe. So that's one thing. Other things that I can think of, right now, at least, nothing's come to my mind, but those are things that we have evidence for. I can't think of anything else right now, but in general, a lot of superstition does circulate perhaps even more than the sunnah, but the superstition, whether coming from the Muslim community or whether Jewish, Christian, Hindu, whatever it is, would circulate because it's this unseen world. It becomes that area of mysterious information circulating. And then, of course, it circulates even faster than factual information just because it sounds very mysterious. It sounds very fascinating. It sounds, well, one, you cannot, validate, and you cannot necessarily find the reference to know whether it's true or not. So you end up basically having this information circulate and you can't really validate it and you can't deny it. So it becomes easier for you to validate it than actually deny it because, hey, you've got no evidence to deny it. So you become such an easy, let's call it, consumer for that information because, hey, are you able to deny it? What evidence do you have? And you certainly don't have any evidence. So you become this consumer. But Islam tells you, well, actually, even if you cannot deny it, I want you to be careful from being easy consumer for this information. And Islam tells you, I'd rather stay silent about commenting about such information because I really don't have any evidence for it. And, of course, if you're talking about Hollywood, you're talking about these scary movies, rated R and whatever it is. Okay. Yeah, certainly they're trying to make money. So whether it's Chucky or whether it's Chucky was actually the most scary one for me. And Exorcism, that was the second, Marianne and all of that. I don't know why on earth my dad would actually, you know, think that if I were to watch it with him and he could just tell me this isn't real, this is just a movie, that somehow I was going to get convinced. I didn't get convinced and I would be having all these nightmares. So, don't waste your time on that. But anyhow, so at the end of the day, is that of course we cannot depend on Hollywood to basically give us valid information about exorcism. Let's just say it that way. Okay. All right, let's continue right there. لا يحل. Okay, sorry about that. Here we go. لا يحل دم امرئ. Hold on. Sorry, here we go. Okay, then we move on. Okay, this is it before we jump on to that one. All right. ولا تتبع أهواء الذين كذبوا بآياتنا والذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة. Okay, there's a fine line that I didn't talk about here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and do not follow the drives of those that would basically deny the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and those that would not believe in Judgment Day. So what is that supposed to mean? This is basically a key thing to let us know how to be selective in choosing the people that surround us, because at the end of the day, they will influence our aqidah and they will influence our behavior. And this is not necessarily you saying, hey, I'm weak or you're strong or etc. This is our own weakness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us basically be aware of it. Being aware of how your brain is wired and how your body is wired is extremely important in order for you to basically deal with it. So when you are perhaps maybe surrounding yourself with somebody that might have a certain, let's say, illness that is contagious, you can't say, well, I'm going to be strong enough and I'm not going to contract it at the end of the day. Well, that this disease is highly contagious and it will basically affect you. And that's the same thing. There are certain behaviors that Islam had considered as extremely and highly contagious, such things as zina, as drinking, as kufr, as perhaps even the type of talks and the type of conversations that involve mocking the religion, mocking commitment to the principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc. All of those things are highly contagious. So Islam tells you, well, just give me a second. All right. So when we look at the ayat basically telling us, well, what is highly contagious? And it would let us know some details about our own selves. In other words, what we're susceptible to. We're susceptible to things that usually contain entertainment. Why? Because it becomes something that we are built basically to seek it. So things like sexual things like perhaps addicting things. We're talking about whether intoxicants, or whether we're talking about different kinds of friends, and we're talking about dialogues, etc. Or other things. And this one is barely talked about, which is the negativity, complaining too much, and all of that. That's also something that is very contained, and was giving these key areas to look out for, because whether you are Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, or whether you are, this or that person, you basically are composed of a number of different wires, whether in your brain, or whether in your heart, or whether in your body, that if exposed to such things, you can become those behaviors, or your identity can change. Here's a question. Somebody might ask, well, is it possible that we're talking about LGBT? Is a person born that way, or are they nurtured to believe or at least behave in that way? It's actually both. So you are basically susceptible to becoming drunk. If you drink, you are susceptible to becoming liking same sex. For example, if you expose yourself to this material, or you expose yourself to these people, you expose yourself to such stimuli, yes, you can become like that. And same thing, you can become a person that is probably loving fitna, loving, this type of entertainment, all of that, because your brain, your body is basically wired to find some level of excitement, some level of pleasure, if probably exposed to these things. And then that pleasure, your brain will interpret it that you need more. Your brain will interpret it that, hey, this is what's going to give me basically the maximized happiness. This is what's going to give me that comfort, etc. And of course, the brain confuses what is supposed to be considered as an area of happiness in the area of basically that stability, that health, etc. So you would think that, hey, if I'm eating a lot of sugar, I'm eating cakes or whatever it is, that I'm feeling happier and happier. But then what we would say is that we know right now, with a sugar spike right after your sugar spike, then it basically clashes right there, and then you're feeling down again. And then definitely your brain is not telling you, hey, listen, that amount of obesity, or that amount of sugar, or whatever, that amount of entertainment is bad for you. Your brain is basically giving you that feeling that, hey, this is bringing you happiness, this is maximizing your happiness, it should be good. So Islam comes in to tell you, just because you feel a spike of that dopamine, you feel a spike of that happiness, whether you feel that spike of a certain level of pleasure, that does not mean that this is right for you. That does not mean that this is supposed to be something that will bring you at least that stability, that happiness in the long term. That's basically where Islam comes in and tells you, well, no, don't wait a minute. I know certain items are addictive, and therefore there are certain items, certain areas, certain environments, certain things that you may see, certain things that you may hear, certain things that you may eat, certain things that you may basically find certain pleasure in, but I want you to stay away from that. I want you to limit that to a certain amount of what is considered within the parameter of halal, because if you exceed the limit, you can become prone to that addiction, and that addiction will be a slippery slope. It may start out with perhaps maybe zina, then that's not going to be enough, and then you're going to probably want multiple people, and then you're going to probably want same, and then the list goes on, and without you realizing, you had just went way past that sirat al-mustaqim, way past that straight path. You're going to find yourself that you are never basically satisfied, because satisfaction actually was within halal. It wasn't with getting more and more of that, but it was actually a delusion that the brain got you into along with shaitan. So therefore, it's not all shaitan basically deluding us. It's also our own body, our own brain can trick us into basically believing certain things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, you need to make sure that you control the environment. وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ أَهْوَاءَ الَّذِينَ كَذَبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. Now you're the first thing in choosing your friends, you want to choose the people with the right aqidah. That's the first thing. The people that have the right foundation. What do they understand about this world? What is their purpose in life? How do they live their life? How does that dynamic relate to the centricity and also their way they would relate with the world and with the people around them and with their considering their priorities? What does that look like? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, here's the foundation. When you select your friends, you need to make sure that they have their vision about themselves, about Allah Almighty, about their purpose in life, basically in place. That's why he says, وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ أَهْوَاءَ الَّذِينَ كَذَبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. So we're talking about al-ahwa. If that person's centricity is basically their drives, if their drives are really what's controlling what websites they go to, the conversations they get involved in, perhaps the way they dress, perhaps the way they might choose their future, might choose basically their maybe their job or whatever it is, or even their social relations. How do they choose? What kind of ideas do they bring in inside basically their dynamic within their life? Whose ideas? Where are these ideas coming from? All of that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, you either have two choices. They're either following speculation. It's all done. It's presented as if it is a narrative that comes with very smart ideas, as if it is what studies say, as if it is what therapists and experts and very smart people and very wise people say. Well, it's the new guru, basically. The new guru, the new shuyukh and all of that. They're basically, what I mean by new shuyukh, I'm talking about new, basically teachers, new mentors. They're basically given new labels, and you really got to be careful with that, because these new labels of giving a beautiful appearance of an expertise, this is extremely scary, because right now, hey, this is a doctor, this is a therapist, this is an expert speaking right there. And of course, if you're talking about the younger generation, they're presented, this is an influencer that's talking. In other words, a person with experience, a certain person with some kind of a great intelligence in here coming in as basically the influencer or the person to be put in a position of they know what they're talking about. So you really got to be really careful, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting you know that if you don't scrutinize where all of this is coming in from, you're going to find yourself really following their trace and following their own basically vision in one, a dhann, or whether it's the other type, which is al-ahwa. Basically the different drives, basically the different entertainment, basically all those different things that people might be just looking for ways to enhance and increase basically their own pleasure. So it's not about maximizing pleasure in short, it's basically Islam telling you, well, you need to look out that pleasure, if you're living the pleasure in this dunya, the chances are you're not going to live it in the akhirah. Simple as that. So does that mean we're supposed to be living nothing but hardship? The answer is no. We're not going to be living in hardship. Islam gave you the amount that is enough for you to basically live, let's call it the stable amount of happiness to keep you alert, to keep your mind alert, to keep your heart alert, to keep your spiritual relations basically at its peak. In other words, it's basically awake, it's basically full of light, etc., to make sure that you are capable of getting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the akhirah, with all the necessary things that are important for your dunya and for your akhirah. Okay, let's continue. وَالَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ. Okay, so كذبوا بآياتنا. This is, they're denying their ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why كذبوا بالآخرة? Because this is emphasizing, isn't كذبوا بآياتنا, isn't the akhirah actually part of al-ayat anyways? Yes, it is. But sometimes the ayat may repeat certain things as a form of emphasis. So because certainly in ayat we're talking about Yawm al-Qiyamah, we're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're talking about perhaps legislation, we're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, aqidah, etc. That's anyways part of al-ayat. So al-akhirah is supposed to be part of that. Why repeat? So that repetition is basically to emphasize, is that person that you are basically following in details. Of course, how do I know if I'm following or not? You're going to look at the conversation. What are the things that you're talking about? That's number one. Number two, how do you yourself reflect that person, and how does that person reflect on you? That's not number two. Number three, we're talking about the amount of time spent. Where are you going? What type of a mission do you two carry together? What type of a mission? Why are you finding the companionship with that person? What are they taking you into? Are they taking you into that akhirah, at least that vision that I'm trying to get to Jannah, and this person, we're working together, probably do activities in the masjid, or probably do activities maybe, I don't know, outside of the masjid, but this is what we're trying to do, trying to get our kids involved, etc. For example, something like that. Or these people basically just thinking and basically dealing with the society just as a place of entertainment, or a place of let's have fun, let's go and walk in the mall, or whatever it is. What is that person's ham? I want you to look at this one. What is ilham? Ilham has two meanings. Ilham can mean what is troubling you. Ilham, what is troubling? When you say what is troubling you, in other words, you consider it as something that is bringing your body into a panic mode, where you carry a mission to uplift such pain, because you recognize this is ham. That's the first one. The second meaning of ilham is to basically have this panic mode drive you towards making a change. In other words, a commitment and a mission. So when you look at that, you're talking about two things. You're talking about the actual drive, and then you're talking about the mission itself, the actual drive, and what it leads you into. So that's ilham. So remember, فَهَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا? When you're talking about that, she had an idea. She definitely had the drive. She basically attempted to tempt him and to create that temptation. She basically locked the doors, thought she can make this confidential, no one know about it. But that's when Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam did not have that. But why? Because لَوْلَا أَرَّأَ بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ, because he had seen the light of his Lord Almighty. So he did not have this same temptation. He did not have the same desire whatsoever. He didn't basically exchange it with her. So what did he do? He basically attempted to run away from the sight and not engage in it whatsoever. That's when she basically runs after him. But we just wanted to get to that part about hamma biha. So that ham that a Muslim, in order to basically have hammil ummah, and the mature you are, the bigger your hum. Okay, what does that mean? If you're a child, your hum is to get a toy, perhaps, or maybe get some time to play a game or go on, I don't know, something about maybe online and get that. But if your hum is bigger, then yes, my hum is to memorize, for example, certain things. My hum is probably to complete and go to college. My hum is to complete my bachelor's, for example, in such and such field, and then get a job, and probably hum to get married, and etc. So the further you grow, in hum in dunya grows. Okay. And then if you were to ask somebody, we're talking about the older the person, the farther they're thinking ahead. So if you're talking to perhaps a 60-year-old person, they're now concerned about their grandchildren. Why? They're going farther than their own generation. They're thinking what's going to happen to this child right there. They're right now probably 10 years old. What's going to happen? What should I do in order to make sure that they stay on the right path when they are 30 or when they are 25? So what are they're trying to think ahead. At the same time, you're seeing that they're, a 30-year-old is probably thinking 10 years ahead. What's going to happen 10 years from now? I want to make sure that I get a home, I get a car, I get married, I get this and this. What are they doing? Well, they're thinking just 10 years ahead. A 40-year-old would think perhaps maybe 20 years ahead. They're thinking about retirement. What's going to happen? Oh, now I'm 40. I need to figure something out. I need to have some kind of a stable income. And then at perhaps 60, they're thinking even way past that. Maybe 30 or 40 years ahead. And the older you are, that's the same thing, maturity. Even when you translate that as within a Muslim mindset, they're probably thinking about their daily salah. Did you pray your daily salah? So this is a younger child. But when this person grows in their deen, no, they're not just worried about their salah because this is inevitable. This is ABC. Thinking about whether they were capable of doing 3 salawat or 5 salawat. No, this is ABC. This is the first stage of their Islam. They're actually right now thinking, are they committed to their qiyam al-layl? They're growing in their commitment. They're growing in how mature their hum is. Now their hum is not only in salah or zakah. No, their hum is, how can I help these people that are probably struggling to find food? And then you have somebody else that's probably thinking that, no, how can I create an institution to help the people in Gaza? Or maybe the people in Bangladesh, or maybe the people in the Horn of Africa. The bigger the hum, the more mature that person is. And then some people are thinking about, hey, only their family members. Others are going farther. They're thinking about their city. Other people know they're thinking about the whole country. Others are thinking about the whole continent. And others are thinking as a universal thing and what they can do about it. And of course, this is just to let us know how far is that person in their hum. Same thing. We're talking about a spiritual level. Stage 1, it's basically I'm trying to fix my deen. Stage 1, I'm trying to just, wear my hijab just to basically make it basic. Stage 2, I'm basically trying to go farther and probably keep distance away from guys and reduce that interaction with guys. Here's stage 2. Stage 3, I'm basically right now trying to stay away completely and trying to keep my environment basically girl-friendly and Islam-friendly and all of that. Now we're going, each and every single one is basically having certain stages. Where are you really going up with that? How far? How do you want to upgrade your Islam? How do you want to upgrade your spirituality? How do you want to upgrade your hum for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Think of it as upgrade. Every single year, you basically would put yourself in this self-muhasaba, exactly like you would do your taxes. What did I do? How much money did I spend this year? How much this? And what is that? What was it spent on? Do I need to reduce my expenses? How can I reduce it? Same thing. Do I need to reduce the amount of time that I've spent with my friends? Perhaps that's going to give me more time to perhaps seek ilm. Do I need to reduce perhaps maybe work time? Or maybe I need to put in work time. Where are my kids' grades right now? Do I need to put in more investment to putting my kids' grades in place? What do I need to do in order to fix that? What about the relationship between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do I need to put in a small daily habit, perhaps 2 rak'ahs, in order to do that qiyam al-layl? Or maybe memorize a certain number of ayat at least per week or whatever it is. So what can we do in order to enhance that upgrade within our Islam, within our Iman, within our commitment, and etc.? And that's ilham. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was basically letting us know, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ. There's those that do not believe in al-akhirah, because that is a center. وَهُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ يَعْدِلُونَ. I want you to look at this يَعْدِلُون, because it's quite tricky. When you say يَعْدِلُون, it's basically telling you that, you remember when we were talking about him, like you're going over the different things that are probably taking the most of your energy, the most of your time, the most of your focus, etc. That's a thing, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَهُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ يَعْدِلُون. It's like, well, they're choosing to I guess choose other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's basically what يَعْدِلُون means. It's like they could have chosen Allah, but they had chosen a different selection. They had chosen dunya over akhirah. They had chosen perhaps friends over Allah. They had chosen hellfire over Jannah. They had chosen perhaps maybe entertainment over memorizing Quran, or probably learning their Islam. Or they had chosen perhaps friends that are entertaining over friends that could be better in their deen, could be better in their commitment, etc. So what did they do? They're basically بِرَبِّهِمْ يَعْدِلُونَ. It's kind of like, well, they had this option, but they chose to do a different option. They had this available track, but then they chose to go on a completely different track. So when you look at يَعْدِلُون, يَعْدِلُون actually can mean to be in justice, and can also mean to sway away from justice. So wait a minute, how would you know which ya'dil? Well, that would basically be the context that would let us know which word is this really referring to. And ya'dil, like I said, can mean to be on track, which is justice, and can be away from the track, and that's بِرَبِّهِمْ يَعْدِلُون, away from the track of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and basically choosing the track of one. Which right now is presented as in a narrative that it's about freedom, that it's about happiness, it's about self-centricity, it's about believing in yourself, it's about feeling yourself, it's about giving yourself me time, it's about giving all of that stuff. And of course, when you're talking about in our times, all right, whether it's the psychology department, the feminist department, there are certain departments, all right, even though they may have some good in them, but there are certain departments that have been utilized to support and to indoctrinate the masses in certain ideologies. And I would say psychology is one of those departments. Sorry, everybody. I am so sorry. But psychology is one of those departments. It has some honey in it, but there's a lot of venom. There is a lot of venom within it, because it presents to you that, yes, certainly there are great studies. Certainly, there are great people that really did help people in understanding them, etc. But there is a lot of venom. There was a lot of infiltration to that department, and certainly you will see that a lot of that narrative, a lot of that basis, a lot of that agenda was really coming from an atheistic agenda that basically did study. And by the way, they did study, and this is real, right? They did study the human psyche or human motives and human behaviors, human selections, etc. But many times it was used for the wrong motive. It was used for the wrong agenda. And certainly there's so many things that today, like never before, we're probably living in the trickiest time, in the most deviating times ever in history, where we have people that really studied the human psyche, human drives, human behavior, human thoughts, how to manipulate the masses using different words, using different methods, and presenting it as if it is science, as if it is basically the newest information, and presenting it like this is what we basically have that understanding in a scientific way, that's something that seems intelligent. So really, really have to be careful in how a lot of those videos that psychology studies say, or feminist studies say, or whatever it is, to be really, really careful, because those are, that's venom, really, I would say, injected in honey. There is some ilm in it. I don't question that. I don't question that there's some ilm, and there's definitely a lot that the Muslim community can benefit from that. I don't question that. But I basically am saying that there's also a lot of venom if we are not capable of, let's say, taking out and basically eliminating that venom. And that's what happens most of the times. Most of the times, the students that sign up, of course, they graduated high school, they go into the psychology department wanting to study psychology, etc. And of course, their, let's call it their aqidah level is probably, hey, it was elementary level anyways, because the Islamic school on Sunday or on the weekend was already giving them, well, basically it was young students, it was probably engineers, or it was probably somebody that's not specialized in Sharia that was teaching them Islam, and basically giving them elementary level of Islamic studies. And then when they go into the, let's call it the whole pond and the whole swamp of all these misconceptions, and you're talking about professors here that are basically experts to put in all these misconceptions, to put in all these stereotypical ideas and right there about Islam, and then they won't give you the time to answer those questions. You're basically cornered with all these questions, and you're just right there, just a student that just graduated high school and an elementary level, literally elementary level in Islamic studies, but then the misconceptions that are given to you are actually needing a professor, an expert to respond to them. But then your elementary level in Islamic studies, that you thought that, hey, that was it. That Islamic studies, they only have the 5 elements of faith and 5 elements of arkan al-Islam and all of that. And yeah, I memorized them. That's all Islam has to say. That's when they basically become so prone to all these misconceptions. This is extremely scary. All right, so let's continue, of course, with this. قل تعالوا أتلوا ما حرم ربكم عليكم. We did actually, hold on, did I actually get to that one, to that area right there? Hold on, let me see, where am I at here? Oh, there to go. This is the area right there. I basically dumped it. Okay, here we go. So we said, al-Qurtubi said there are 14 different things to talk about in terms of this ayah. قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُ مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ أَلَّا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ مِنْ إِمْلَاقٍ. نحن نرزقكم وإياهم ولا تقربوا الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن ولا تقتلوا النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تعقلون ولا تقربوا مال اليتيم. So we did explain all of those ayat up until 153 last time. And we said al-Qurtubi wanted to comment on these set of ayat. How many ayat are they? So we're looking at 1, 2, 3. So those 3 ayat. And he said there are 14 different matters to talk about. So we did talk about al-Qurtubi and what he said in regards to the words قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُوا. And we said ta'ala is basically calling in, and that's basically something that a Muslim is supposed to be doing, that da'wah, and inviting people to basically come forward to learn and educate them about Islam, and of course give them the yaqeen, the certainty, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically explained Islam, and without all the speculation, and certainly not any of those that basically are coming from the drives and so forth. So then the ayat would basically say, okay, well, here's what you need to start out with. You need to start out with by removing that shirk. If you're not removing that shirk, you're going to find yourself confused in regards to the resources. Okay, let's see. Here he said, as for number 3, we did talk about number 2. Let's see. Ma harrama rabbukum. So this is ma harrama, basically talking about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forbid. So we could see this is khabariya. This is an informative clause in basically in this ayah. Let's just delete this for a bit. Let's just delete all of these things so we can see it better, right? Let's do it. We're just going to delete everything, and then we're going to right now see. So when you say atlu ma harrama rabbukum, you wanted to comment on that one. Why is it atlu? Atlu actually means let me recite for you. What is it tilawa anyways? Tilawa is to go over certain words and to process the words in understanding them, process the words and how you basically interact with these words. That's a tilawa. A tilawa could mean just to plainly recite. In other words, to say the sound of those ayat. And the second piece of it, tilawa, is to process what you're reading, which is tadabbur. Tadabbur basically comes with it. So here, atlu ma harrama rabbukum alaykum. Let me recite for you what your Lord Almighty had forbid upon you. Okay, so what is this supposed to be bringing in? At least within the ayat, it's basically coming in as informative clauses. Like, well, let me tell you, as to inform you, this is what you need to be doing. This is what you do not need to be doing. And of course, in the modern culture, let me comment on this one. Modern culture, and what I mean by modern culture, I don't mean just Western culture, but I'm talking about the modern generation and the modern generations. And of course, certainly the culture that comes with globalization basically expects that you do not dictate. You do not come to teach. You do not come to direct, but you basically invite. But Islam tells us that not all forms of discipline are supposed to be inviting. There's a certain form of discipline where you really need to give direction. You really need to say, well, you know what? Here's 1, 2, 3. Let you know there's 1, 2, 3 piece of information. So it's not enough to say, what do you think? Would you want to do that? No, sometimes, there's a very common thing. And I've even heard even dua make this mistake. When they're asked, does Islam require women, for example, to choose to wear hijab? Does Islam obligate, or can a father obligate his daughter or his son or whatever to actually do 1, 2, 3, 4? Okay, well, the answer is yes, of course. The answer is yes, of course. But even dua fall in this mistake because of the influence of the Western culture, that there is no right and wrong, which is the culture of relativism, and that you're just not in the position to inform or to discipline or to regard as something being right and wrong, and that it's all just a point of view. That's the basis. That's the premise that they're basing that idea on. And then they would say, well, yeah, Islam does not impose it. Islam does not obligate it. Islam does not tell you that you have to do it as an obligation. Yes, Islam does say that. Islam has two different things. Islam has one side, it will tell you, yes, you are obligated to do this and this. And if you are in a position of authority, you are obligated to make sure that people are disciplined within that area of discipline. So just like the government itself, it will impose basically certain traffic lights and tell you, hey, once that red light goes red, I don't want you basically driving past the red light, but I can see that it's safe. I looked left and right and everything's fine. Can't you just trust my intelligence and my intellect to know better than that red light? I just made sure that I was safe. You know what? I'm okay if I put my life in danger. What's it with you, Mr. Government? I said, no, wait a minute. I basically have the power and the responsibility to ensure safety. So I will tell you a certain color that you cannot cross, and I will tell you a certain rule and a certain fine in the case of you not respecting the rule that I will be basically imposing upon everybody. I'm going to either imprison you or perhaps make you do community service, or I'll probably charge you with a certain fine. And certainly if the government does that, that's the same thing within Islam. Even within Islam, if the person has the power to impose a certain discipline, then in that situation, yes, the father does have the power or the authority or the obligation to impose, for example, his children come back at a certain time, or basically not go to public school, or probably wear hijab, or probably not hang out with this and that friend, or probably not play in these games, or within this area, or probably not use I don't know, electrical gadget and all these different things. Yes, the father does have that, and therefore it would be obligatory on the children, even if they had reached the age of puberty, it would be obligatory upon them to obey. What's the evidence? وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ. That's the evidence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and obey Allah, obey the messenger, and obey ulil amr. Ulil amr is whether it's the father, whether it's the mother, whether it's the government, whether it's basically those that are in charge. They basically wanted to put a certain discipline, a certain structure, then you would have to obey it. You would have to obey it as long as it does not contradict and does not conflict with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's orders. It becomes obligatory. Same thing if it's your husband, for example, telling you, hey, I don't want you buying from that place. And you're like, well, it's mubah, it's halal. What on earth would give you the right to stop me? Well, yes, it's ulil amri minkum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered you to obey him, and as long as it's not haram, just obey him and find an alternative place to shop in. But I'm not convinced with the idea. I agree, you're not convinced. It's definitely obvious that you're not convinced. But Islam tells you to obey ulil amr as a form of discipline, regardless of you being convinced or not. Regardless. All right. All right. So ألا تشركوا تعالوا أتلوا ما حرم ربكم ما حرم ربكم عليكم. So we're talking about this, giving us basically the informative clause, and certainly right there, ألا تشركوا به شيئا. To not associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وبالوالدين إحسانا. I want you to look at this one. ألا تشركوا به شيئا وبالوالدين إحسانا. There's always a correlation in the ayat. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. That connection between shirk and also disrespecting parents, as if it is part of aqidah, because Yes, in a way it is. In a way it is because it becomes as the foundation of how you set your mindset, how you recognize to appreciate all the different things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you, and how to recognize basically all that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed you with. And that's the foundation of you recognizing why you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the first thing. Then the second piece is you recognize all the contribution that your parents had basically given you in your life. That contribution that made your life as basically what it is right now. Let's see. أَلَّا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. We talked about this. One thing I would want to comment on this one. Let's see. He said, هذه الآية أمر من الله تعالى لنبيه عليه الصلاة والسلام بأن يدعو جميع الخلق إلى سماع تلاوة ما حرم الله. وهكذا يجب على من بعده من العلماء أن يبلغوا الناس ويبين لهم ما حرم الله عليهم مما حل. قال تعالى that's different قراءة. ليبينن hold on, this is the different قراءة. لا يبيننه للناس ولا يكتمونه. Different قراءة, it has a different way. Wonder if they actually put the different قراءة. Anyhow, so when of course we're talking about this ayah, Allah al-Qurtubi, basically said this is a commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Prophet ﷺ to basically invite all the people to listen to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and basically know the parameters of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forbid. And certainly this would be incumbent upon the later scholars to basically inform the people of the truth and let them know basically what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had clarified for them and not conceal it. Okay, let's see right here. Ibn al-Mubarak had mentioned this story. What does he say? So Rabi' ibn Khaytham tells basically a companion that was sitting with him, would you want me to tell you of Sahifa? A Sahifa is like a manuscript. And what, hold on, أيسرك أن تؤتى بصحيفة من النبي لم يفك خاتمها؟ قال نعم. قال فاقرأ قل تعالوا أتل ما حرم ربكم عليكم فقرأ إلى آخر الثلاث آيات. Okay, so what did he want to say? He said, would you want me to show you off to a manuscript or to a note basically that until now many did not basically understand it and many did not realize it and many did. Oh, sorry, but I have to end it right here, inshallah. I'll continue tomorrow because I'm getting basically contractor coming in. I have to stop right here. Sorry, we'll continue inshallah tomorrow. Sorry for not being able to take any questions. Just got the phone call right